Groupie moment.
Hello and welcome to a very special bonus episode of the Kaiju Groupie Podcast. I am your host, Michael, and today I'm going to be joined by Matt Parmley and Patrick Galvan, organizers for the upcoming Kaiju Masterclass online event held on October the 2nd through the 4th. And guys, I am super excited about this one. I truly believe that Kaiju Masterclass is going to be the premier event for any Kaiju and Tokusatsu fan, period. I am really looking forward to you guys hearing this conversation. It was fantastic having these guys on. But before we get into all that, I do want to do a little bit of housekeeping and say that if you want to support this show, the best way to do that is leave me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And what that's going to do is that's going to put this program in front of other Kaiju and Tokusatsu fans just like you. Criticize me all you want in the comments, but make sure you make it 5 stars worth. And I promise I will read your comments on a future episode. You can also send your feedback to kaijugroupiepod@gmail.com. So without further ado, let's head into the conversation with Matt Parmley and Patrick Galvan. Fellas, thank you so much for joining me. It's a pleasure to have you for this bonus episode of my podcast.
No, thanks for having us. The pleasure is definitely all ours, and I appreciate you making time for us out of your busy schedule.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for having us on.
Oh, absolutely, fellas. Well, first of all, thank you, Matt, for randomly messaging me the other night and say, hey, you want to talk about Kaiju Masterclass with us? I said, sure. But no, it sounds like a lot of fun. I have been super interested in this event for a very long time. So yeah, getting to kind of meet the guys behind it is going to be a lot of fun. So before we get started, I want you fellas to take a few minutes to tell the listeners who are not quite familiar with who you are, just basically who you are and about the work you do. So we're going to start with Matt. Matt, kick us off.
Yeah, so I am Matt Parmley. I am co-host of the Kaiju Transmissions podcast. My co-host is Kyle Bird. Unfortunately, Bird cannot make it tonight, so I'm trying to hold the ship down. But we have presented panels at G-Fest. We've done a lot of really cool interviews. We've interviewed Tom Kitagawa, suit actor for the Godzilla Millennium series, Mizuho Yoshida, suit actor for GMK, among also Legion and Gamera 2. But we've done some really cool interviews, and when Steve approached Kyle and I about being part of the masterclass, we readily accepted, and we've been working on this for several months and really looking forward to just talking about it tonight.
Interesting, Matt. I love the work that you and Kyle do on Kaiju Transmissions, and if you don't mind me saying this, I really view you guys as the next Kaiju cast, at least in that upper echelon of Kaiju podcasts. You know, in the wake of Kaiju cast ending, there was some big shoes to fill, and I really have enjoyed the content you guys have been able to put out since then.
And I really appreciate that. And you know what? We do owe a lot to Kyle Yount. He when we first started our show, we reached out to him, and he's had us on his show a couple times. We've had him on our show a couple times, and he's been someone who was able to just kind of give us some wisdom and guidance. And so yeah, I mean, I think that means a lot, and I appreciate that compliment.
Yeah, man, that's absolutely. And it's not just in the content realm either. It's how involved you guys have become in the community, with different events and different things that you've had going on. With Kaiju Quarantine and some other things that we've all been able to participate with each other in. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure to get to know you guys through your show. But we've also got another organizer for this fantastic event, Patrick Galvan. So Patrick, you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the work you do?
Sure. My name is Patrick Galvan. I am something of a film journalist who specializes in Japanese cinema, namely Japanese science fiction. I've written for a number of websites, including, and most prominently, I'd say, Sci-Fi Wire, which is the official news site for the Sci-Fi Channel. And I've also written a lot of articles for TohoKingdom.com, which I think is still, I think it's still pretty well known amongst amongst kaiju fans.
For sure.
Yeah, I've written extensively about the films, the people who make the films. I've done a handful of interviews over the years, mostly with genre historians, although also with some people who have some association with the artist behind it, like Yamato Reiko, who was a student of Akira Ifukube. I interviewed her earlier this year. But yeah, I'm just a big fan of Japanese cinema, especially Japanese films of the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, and the golden era of Kaiju Eiga is right smack dab in the middle of that golden era. So it's always been a big interest of mine, and I just love the genre and I love writing about it, and I'm just and I love sharing ideas about the genre, and that's why I'm especially thankful and grateful to be part of the Kaiju Masterclass organizational team, not only for the opportunity to talk about these films, but also to be involved with such a stellar group of fellow organizers. Kyle Bird and Matt Parmley, their podcast, Kaiju Transmissions, is by far my favorite of the Kaiju podcasts out there. And Steve Rifle, him and Ed Gottschalk, they were the guys who, more than anybody else, shaped my personal outlook in terms of how I view the genre and how I think about it and write about it. So to work with people like them and Eric Hominick and John DeSantis, I am just more than grateful to be involved in this endeavor.
For sure. Now, Patrick, I have not had the pleasure of talking with you before, so this is the first time I've been able to interact with you. And the whole purpose behind my show is to have conversations with other fans and people within this genre. So, if you don't mind me asking you, how did you kind of get involved with kaiju, tokusatsu, and just this fandom in general?
Well, I kind of have a unique standing in that I did not really get into Godzilla until a little later in my childhood than most people. I did not grow up watching the films on VHS like a lot of people do. And believe it or not, and this may make me sound kind of blasphemous, or maybe that's not the word, but the very first film I ever saw that was called Godzilla was the TriStar Godzilla.
Oh wow! Okay.
Up to that point in my life, I'd heard the name Godzilla, but I'd assumed that it was kind of like the Boogeyman. It was like a generic pop culture name that had no trademarked property to it. And so when I saw the TriStar Godzilla, I assumed they just took that generic name and made a movie out of it. And it wasn't until 2 years later, when Godzilla 2000 came out, my parents and myself all mistook it as a sequel for the TriStar Godzilla. And so we all went to go see it, assuming that we were going to see Matthew Broderick and Hank Azaria fight the monster all over again. And it wasn't until I got into the theater and it started playing that I realized that this was a Japanese film. And it wasn't, and so I saw Godzilla 2000. That was my first proper Godzilla film, I guess you could say. Okay. And then later on that same year, the Sci-Fi Channel had a double feature of Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah and Godzilla vs. Mothra 92. And that was the turning point where I realized, hey, there's not only one Japanese Godzilla film, there is a whole franchise of Japanese Godzilla films that predate the Matthew Broderick film that I saw a couple of years ago. And that's where I really became interested. And I loved Godzilla 2000. I loved Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. I was even fond of Mothra 92 back then. And so I was, at that point, just, eagerly grabbing for every Godzilla film I could get my hands on. And of course, inevitably, you find out that there's more than two Japanese science fiction than just Godzilla movies. There's Gamera, there's other films made by Ishiro Honda and Jun Fukuda, and et cetera and so forth. And and just one thing led to another, and it's just remained a passion of mine ever since. So, Patrick, would it be safe to ask that you have some nostalgia for this genre, but you don't have maybe as the amount of nostalgia that a lot of us have for these films? That's probably fair to say, because again, I didn't see my first true Godzilla film until Godzilla 2000 came out in the theaters. So I didn't have volumes of VHS tapes. I didn't have very many Godzilla toys growing up. Actually, I'll tell you this much: Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster First time I saw that film was when the DVD came out in 2005 or 6.
Oh wow! Okay.
So a lot of people. So I didn't see that film on MST3K or in the or on a VHS tape or whatever. So my first time seeing that film was in its Japanese language version on DVD when it came out in like the mid 2000s. So so yeah, I think to an extent, while Godzilla was certainly a part of my adolescence and late childhood, I guess you could say. I definitely don't have as deep and far back of a nostalgic attachment to it as other people do, but it's definitely something that I still love and cherish this very day. And I'm pushing 30, so it definitely did something right for me.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And it's interesting it's interesting for me when I get to talk with folks that don't have the deep nostalgia for this genre, like a lot of us do. Now, admittedly, nostalgia does cloud my vision somewhat because I do have that deep nostalgia. I have those sea of VHS tapes and original DVD releases in my closet somewhere. But like I said, it's really interesting when I get to talk with someone who does not have that. Because that just tells me that there's something to these films that still intrigues people to this day that you don't have to have grown up with them to really appreciate them.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Matt, I want to start with you. How did you get involved with Kaiju Masterclass?
So, I think the easiest thing the way to answer that would be Kaiju Masterclass kind of started this weird genesis way back in April-ish. So Monstrosities came out with this video and it got posted to one of our mutual friends, Tom Gwelly, somebody who's been on our podcast a bunch of times, but I got posted to his Facebook page, and then a bunch of us were commenting, and then kind of a genesis out of that came with this idea of like, well, why don't we just do our own thing since COVID's killing all the different conventions? And at first we kind of all laughed about it. And then Steve Rifle kind of took it upon himself, along with really Eric Homnick, who they really thought, hey, we actually can do this. Let's just kind of put our minds together. And then from there, they started recruiting different people. Like they reached out to Kyle Bird first, and they reached out to Patrick, and they reached out to John and myself. And then we have Kyle Gilmore, who does all of our graphics and videos and stuff. Sure. And from there, we just kind of started saying, well, what kind of guests can we get? Who do we think we can reliably contact, and what's our ideas for panels and those kinds of things? And so probably it really started picking up steam only a couple months ago, because it's hard to this is our first time doing anything like this, right? And
sure,
there's so much work that goes into this. There's so much stuff logistically. Also, we're communicating with guests across the ocean, you know what I mean? Like you have to have a translator, you have to have their video connection, internet connection has to be reliable. There's so many different things that go into it. So trying to work through all that and scheduling, it's been a lot of work, but I'm really happy to say this past 2.5 weeks has been a blur with all the guests that we've been able to land, and very proud of the team, very proud that we all work really well together. And I'm just thankful that Steve and Eric included me and Bird, honestly. I'm just really thrilled to be a part of it.
Oh, for sure. I mean, in the age of COVID, there has been, because that was one of the things that we were all curious about after, it was specifically after G-Fest was officially canceled. We were curious what the replacement was going to be. And so it's fantastic to see, different events like this pop up as a supplement or as a sort of a pseudo replacement to that. So there's still something for fans to engage in. Patrick, how did you get involved with this project?
I think it was maybe 2 or 3 days after that Facebook thread that Matt mentioned that Kyle Bird contacted me and said, hey, Steve and Eric are putting together an idea for a online Godzilla convention, and we all want you to be part of it. And I admire Steve tremendously, as I mentioned, sure. And I'm very good friends with Eric, so my immediate reaction was, what are you kidding me? Of course I'd be happy to be involved in this kind of thing.
Right.
But that was just basically it. They started seriously talking about the idea of doing an online Godzilla convention. They were just kind enough to think of me to be an organizer, and that's really all there is to it.
Right. Okay. So now you've mentioned some of the other folks that are involved with this, like Steve Rifle and some others. So, and I, unfortunately, a lot of the guys that could not make it for this conversation. So who all else is involved with Kaiju Masterclass?
Yeah, so of course, Steve Rifle, who wrote the Ishiro Honda biography, most people are probably familiar with his work.
Sure. And
you have Eric Homneck, who he is the official Akira Ifukube biographer. He runs akirafukube.org. He is he actually has done a ton of work with the family and has basically their blessing to write the stuff that he writes on the website.
Yeah, it's a fantastic resource.
Yeah, it really is. John DeSantis, who he has scored movies like Conduit. Of course, he also, like, as far as Godzilla fans go, he is the one that conducted the concerts that were at G-Fest. Right. So Kaiju Crescendo, etc. And then you have Bird, which is my co-host for Kaiju Transmissions, which Bird has actually done some pretty cool stuff. He used to write for Sci-Fi Japan, and he's wrote for the Lost Films fanzine, which is John LeMay's little fanzine that he puts out. And he has some essays out in Kong Unmade, which is a John LeMay book. And then Kyle Gilmore, who is handling like all of our graphics, and he's on the video that we put out there. He's produced some things like Dinosauria, which is a children's program. He actually wrote and directed a little short thriller called Unrest. So he has some hand in there. And so we have a really strong team, and all of us, honestly, like we know each other pretty well at this point, and like it's been just a very exciting and fun experience. A lot of these conventions can be really stressful behind the scenes. If you've ever had any sort of like insight into conventions, the people that work behind them, there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of stress, but we've done a really good job of just rolling with the punches, figuring stuff out on the fly, and I'm just honestly really proud of the work we've done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Now it really matters a whole lot when you have a really solid team behind you, especially when you're trying to put together an event of this level, because like I just said, you know, there is a certain level of expectation with a conference, and we're in this sort of this weird territory now where everything is now online. So what does a Kaiju Con need to look like to be both, to be interesting, engaging, and just enjoyable for the fans? So during all this process, fellas, what is the guest? Because you've got a number of guests here already listed on the website. What is the guest that you guys are most excited for you to have with Kaiju Masterclass?
I mean, I really think the headliner guest, which would be Shusuke Kaneko,
right,
Shinji Higuchi, Shinichi Wakasa, like those are, and of course David Arnold, who scored the '98 Godzilla film, as well as Bond movies. Those are kind of the ones that I'm really looking forward to. But I'm going to pivot and actually say that two guests that I'm really interested in are Norman England and Brad Warner. And so both of them have experience working overseas. Norm was actually on set of several Godzilla films. He basically ran I don't know if you remember, Shusuke Kaneko had a website that was documenting some of the stuff that was happening on the set of GMK. That was all the pictures and stuff were put up there by Norman England, and he has worked on the set, but he's documented set production of these films for several years. And Brad Warner worked at Tsuburaya for like 15 years. And so he's got a lot of background just working at Tsuburaya Productions. He's got a lot of really great stories. If you've ever heard his interviews, they're both really engaging and pretty funny. He tells some wild stuff that happened at Tsuburaya. So like, I'm really looking forward to them. And of course, Allison Adams, daughter of Nick Adams. Nick Adams he plays, of course, Astronaut Glenn in Monster Zero. And that's my favorite Godzilla film, so I have a really vested interest in that. And of course, Pat Saperstein, daughter of Henry Saperstein, who had numerous collaborations with Toho. So we're just have a really stellar panel list and guest list, and I'm just excited that we've been able to have like it's really weird to think that most of the people that we've aimed to get to actually be part of this have said yes. Mm-hmm. And like, I don't know. I'm kind of out of words to be able to put that into context. Like every person that we said, okay, we think we have contacts for this person. And then they all came back and said they wanted to be a part of it. And I think that speaks volumes to what this community means and the fact that like so many cool people want to actually be involved with the fans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a market. There's still a market and a passion for it, right? That's because I was going through the guest list here a few minutes ago, and I'm just sort of blown away by the quality, not just the quantity, but the quality of guests that you guys have been able to get to participate in this, man. Of course, I love John LeMay's work. I love, Kaneko's work, of course. Probably I'm very partial to Bob Eggleton because I love all his artwork that he's ever produced for like kaiju and Godzilla themed artwork. Like his books, the Random House books that came out in the 90s. I love those. The artwork is stellar on those. And so I'm excited to hear I'm excited to hear from him, as sort of an artist myself. I'm excited for his particular talk or his panel. So Patrick, let me ask you, what guests are you particularly excited for during this event?
Well, at the risk of sounding predictable, I'd definitely say Shusuke Kaneko is the one I'm particularly interested in, namely because what we're hoping to do with interviewing him is we're hoping to approach his interview in kind of a different way than what's normally done. We're hoping to avoid the usual, were you a fan of Gamera when you were a kid before you made the Heisei trilogies?
Yeah.
How did you get the job of making GMK? How did Mothra and King Ghidorah get replaced? How did they replace Varan and Angus? Like, everybody already knows the answer to those questions, and we're hoping to avoid the predictable stuff. And what Steve has talked about in a promo video we made for our channel a couple days or weeks ago, whatever it was, is that we're hoping to explore the political nature and the thematic nature of his films. Like,
sure.
Like the messages that he's trying to get across in his films, like especially in GMK. Because that kind of thing is, because, GMK is oftentimes talked about as, this high point of the Millennium series, which it certainly is, I think. Right. People talk about it in terms of having its special effects and the evil, scary Godzilla and such. But there's a lot more going on in that film besides just, special effects and an evil Godzilla. There's lots of very interesting observations about Japan in the early 20th century that's being talked about and commented on in that film. And I'm really looking forward to hopefully getting picking Kaneko's brain about those kind of things and getting him to talk about it. Aside from that, somebody who I'm interested in another guest I'm interested in or particularly interested in hearing is Ed Gottschalski. He's going to be doing a couple of panels, and one of which is a panel on Godzilla versus Biollante. Because as a lot of people know, he actually recorded a commentary track for the Echo Bridge release of that film, which due to a large complicated reason was never actually put before the public. And you can Google that if you don't know what the reason for that is. So that track, so he recorded a full-on commentary track, did a lot of research, knows a lot about the film, and unfortunately that commentary track was never released, and Ed is not, legally able to just, put it out there before the public. So it's kind of like, sitting somewhere collecting dust. But this panel he's going to be doing, he's going to do a full-on lecture about the film. And so this is probably like, the next best way to learn about Godzilla versus Biollante, because here's the guy who knows a lot about the film, did a lot of research, and even though he can't release what he previously did a couple of years ago, he's going to do the next best thing by sharing information about the film in the form of a lecture. And I'm very excited for that. Biollante is one of my favorite Godzilla films, and Ed is somebody who I also have tremendous amount of respect for. So I'm very much looking forward to his panel on Godzilla versus Biollante.
I have fallen sort of out of love with Biollante over the years. I recently watched it again, maybe a couple weekends ago, and it sort of reignited my appreciation for that film. Just the way the characters, the way it's shot, just of course the Godzilla, the updated Godzilla suit that we would see, throughout the majority of the Heisei era, with some tweaks, of course. It's actually my favorite as far as Godzilla designs go. To me, it's one of my favorites, and probably the most iconic in terms of that is the first image that pops up into my brain and a lot of other folks' brains when you say the word Godzilla. So how are these conversations going to be structured? Are they going to be sort of one-on-one interviews, panels? Are they going to be a little bit of mix of both?
I think you're going to see a lot of moderation. So kind of an interview or someone asking a question and some back and forth.
Sure.
And that's going to be kind of, I think, the format throughout most. There is plans to have a Q&A session for some of the panels where possible. It sort of depends. Like, when you get two guys like Carlos Huante and Ricardo Delgado, who are going to be talking about the unmade 1994 Godzilla film, and actually Keith Aiken's going to be moderating that. Like, I imagine that for their panel, they may not have time to get to Q&A, but like for our panel, for the panel that I'm doing, which is with Kyle Bird, John LeMay, and Kevin Dierendorf, we're going to be talking about the making of Godzilla vs. Destroya. And we'll probably have some time at the end for like a Q&A. So we hope to have both very guided conversation and dialogue, but also be able to engage the audience through YouTube, which everything is broadcast over YouTube. We have a YouTube channel under Kaiju Masterclass. So when people post comments, we'll have somebody actually moderating the comments and trying to be able to pick out some of the better questions that come through and to respond to those. Now, we can't promise that for everybody, but that's something that we aim to do because we do want to engage the audience out there as if they were sitting at G-Fest or at a convention watching these panels unfold in person, because usually those have a semblance of interaction between the panelists and the audience.
Right. Now I was sitting here, I was wondering like how you guys were going to do like community involvement, like if you were going to do Q&A, and if you're going to be answering questions, or if it was just going to be sort of just a straight panel discussion. So that's super interesting.
Yeah, it'll be mixture. And one of the other things that we're trying to get off the ground is, as far as community engagement, a lot of the people that go to these conventions and who are dealers and artists and vendors and things, like they've lost all that revenue for the year. And so we are offering both Kaiju Masterclass is free and open to the public, but also dealers and vendors and artists are able to actually post. We have a Kaiju Masterclass vendor marketplace on Facebook that just got set up. We're going to be advertising people on our website and on our social media accounts to the best of our ability through Facebook and Twitter, so that we can actually put out the people that would go to G-Fest and be selling all their toys can now hopefully make some of that same revenue through Kaiju Masterclass. And again, that's free to them. We are putting this entire event on our own dime. So everything that we're basically paying everything out of pocket. And we're trying to, I think the coolest thing about this whole process for me is that it is really a way to give back to the community, but also put on a really awesome convention and make it free to everybody. And that's something that like I'm extremely proud of.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, it's like a virtual, you guys are going to be having like a virtual dealer's room, pretty much.
That is correct. Yeah, that is the goal. I don't know. Now, listen, full disclosure, I don't know how well that's going to work, right? Because it's our first time doing it. But we are trying. Like, we are definitely trying to get that out there, and we're going to have it. We actually have, if you go to our website, we do have the vendors page up, and we'll be adding to it throughout the week. As of this recording, we're a week and a half away from the event, so we're trying to get all that put together. So I expect, like anything else, I don't expect this to be perfect. I expect some snafus, but we're definitely going to do our damnedest to put on a good show and to be as engaging as we can be, both to the fan base out there and also to the guests.
Mm-hmm. Right, for sure. And, no new adventure is without its hiccups, right? Because this is, the whole online conference, the whole online con is still a fairly new concept. Like it came it came because of a need, and the need came because of COVID. So, what I've seen from you guys so far and just what you've been able to put together so far, I'm super excited. And I think that, this being the first masterclass event, I think people are going to be a little bit more forgiving if there are some hiccups, right?
Let's hope so.
We definitely. I think I'm just going to say, listen, please forgive us in advance, all right? If you have ever met me, like they're going to screw it up. Like something's going to happen. But you know what? I accept that going in, and so like whenever it does happen, I'm gonna be like, you know what? Let's just roll with the punches.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. Patrick, are you going to be a part of any panels or key discussions during the event?
Yes, I will be. I'll be involved in 2 panels. The first of which is a panel on the composer Akira Ifukube. Eric Hominick will be joining me for that. And It's going to be kind of a unique and sort of different approach to Akira Ifukube. We're not going to be doing a talk about all the Godzilla films he did, or just like a course history throughout his biography or whatnot. What we're going to be doing is we're going to examine 3 films that he scored in the early to mid 1950s. The first of which is Children of Hiroshima from 52, Hiroshima from 53, and the third and final film is the original Godzilla. Now these are three films that he made immediately after the occupation of Japan was over, and the subject of the atomic bomb was essentially free territory as far as filmmakers in Japan were concerned. And these are also certainly, of the atomic bomb films that were made in the immediate post-war occupation era, immediate post-occupation era, these are by far the 3 films that have endured over the years the most, that are still talked about the most, written about the most, whereas many of the others have been long since forgotten, and many of which are not even commercially available in this day and age.
Sure.
But Children of Hiroshima is out there. Hiroshima recently got put out on Blu-ray by Arrow Video, I think. And of course, Godzilla needs no introduction. And just the interesting fact that Akira Ifukube did the music for all 3 of them that's kind of like, that's just kind of like one of those interesting coincidences. It was certainly not intended that these 3 films would be, above all the others, the ones that endured. But the fact that they were, and the fact that Ifukube did the music for all 3 of them, is just a very interesting, historical point. And what's also interesting is that the 3 films each deal with the topic of the bomb and post-war Japan in very different kind of ways. And so what we're going to do is we're going to examine those 3 films and also the music that Ifukube wrote for them, and dissect them and analyze them, and hopefully allow people to think about the films and the music in particular in a new kind of way. One thing that I've always tried to do in my writing is always to try to create a little bit of interest, even if just a slight little variation, create new interest in music, in a interest in what these people have done outside of Godzilla. And this is an opportunity to do that. And the fact that, there is Ifukube and the original Godzilla as a starting point for this panel. What draws people to this panel, and then it allows us to delve into a little bit of what Ifukube did outside of it, is, a good way to do that, and also hopefully make people think about the original Godzilla and the other films in a new light. And the second panel that I'm going to be doing is a panel on the director Jun Fukuda, who Godzilla fans know for making Versus the Sea Monster, Son of Godzilla, a number of the 70s films. And joining me on that panel will be Steve Reifel and Stuart Galbraith IV. Those 2 famously did a commentary track for the Media Blasters release of Godzilla vs. Megalon, which unfortunately, because of other legal complications, was yanked off of the market. Although it is out there if you know where to look. Right. But these two did this amazingly detailed commentary about Megalon, and it was also, their commentary had a lot to do with Jun Fukuda himself. And Stuart, unlike a lot of us, and this is what was very interesting, is that he actually knew Jun Fukuda. He met him and interviewed him in the 90s. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to look through Jun Fukuda's career, talk about films he made besides just his sci-fi films, and delve into his work and his life, and have Stuart share some anecdotes about meeting him and so on and so forth. Hopefully, also create some interest in his non-genre works, some of which are actually pretty available even in the United States. And what I'm particularly looking forward to is that because Jun Fukuda over the years has been kind of neglected, especially when compared to Honda. Kind of thought of as a lesser director than Honda, I would say, in some circles. But I personally am very, very fond of his movies, and he's actually as far as Godzilla directors go, he's certainly in the top 5 as far as I'm concerned. And I'm hoping, if we are successful, we could create some new levels of appreciation for this wonderful and very overlooked director, who throughout his own life was very harsh in his own work, but toward the end of his life, started to become a little more open to the fact that, his films did have a major impact on people across the world, and that they're still endured and talked about today is very telling about, the quality of his work, even if he's not as, talked about as, say, Ishiro Honda. But yeah, I'm very much looking forward to both of those panels because it will allow me a window to talk about these films in a way that's not done very often, and hopefully create some new levels of interest for what these artists have done outside of just Godzilla.
Yeah, I really enjoy Jun Fukuda's work. Like like we talked about Ebera, Horror of the Deep. We talked about Son of Godzilla and some others. But yeah, I really think that he sort of lives in the shadow of Honda. Like, yeah. I like what you said there, that he doesn't necessarily get the recognition that he rightfully deserves. Mm-hmm. So aside from those, are there any other like really standout panels that you guys know are happening that you really want people to know about?
I think, I mean, I don't know that this is a standout panel per se. I have one that I'm doing on Expo 70 and how that impacted various kaiju productions and media. So like, if you don't know what the World Expo is or the World's Fair, they had one in Japan in 1970. Of course, Gamera versus Jiger was actually shot like literally there. And Stan Hyde will be joining me because he was there in the flesh in 1970. He has pictures and different stuff. So we're going to have firsthand knowledge of what happened there. And then Kevin Dierendorf will be joining us to talk about some of the other media ties that go into the World's Fair. There's a really interesting history there and how it actually played out for some various kaiju media and productions. And then aside from that, like actually, I think one of the things I'm looking forward to is learning about Nick Adams and Henry Saperstein through the lens of their daughters. It's always interesting to hear, like, I can't imagine what my kid's going to say about me when I pass away. Like, so just hearing, like, what were they like as parents? What, all the different stuff that maybe we haven't heard about them. And so there's going to be a really cool interview that'll be done that'll talk about both of their lives from the perspective of their daughters, and just kind of hearing that through, their eyes will be very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really enjoy stuff like that. Like I love sort of that behind the scenes, I'm trying to think of the right word to describe it, but I like it when I can get a glimpse into the personal life of somebody I admire. Like we know of these people, like their outward facing personas. But I really like it especially when we can get for the men and women who have passed on, we can get some of their family members to tell us, what were they like, as a person, not just as this director or actor or whomever that we admire on screen. Mm. So that sounds super interesting, Matt. Super interesting. So I'm going to ask you both just something a little bit personal. This event is going to mean a lot to people because, like I said, in the age of COVID, online cons like this are becoming more often, and they're becoming vital and they're much appreciated. So, starting with Patrick, what does an event like this, mean to you as a fan?
Well, I would say for me as a fan, it's just like, I feel very grateful to be involved in this kind of thing, mostly just because it's being headed by and being populated by people who are passionate about this thing and about this genre and about sharing information about the movies and about the people who made them. And what it means, I guess what it means to me is that, there are still people out there who are interested in these films beyond just, the merchandise value, beyond just, the toys and the various Blu-rays and DVDs, all which are fine. That's great, obviously. And obviously we need those. But, the fact that there's so many people who want to know more about and want to share more about the makings of the films, stories about the people who made them, that's what this convention really means the most to me, is that it's rewarding to know that there are other people who want to know the same kind of things I want to know about. And, as I said in another interview recently, not one person can have all the answers. Not everybody's going to know all the factoids about this little movie. Not everybody is going to know the answer to every single question about every single film, or know what this person did at this film and at this point in history. But by having a large collective amount of people who are experts and people who are authoritative and who have done a lot of research and are passionate and are willing to share, that's what makes a convention like Kaiju Masterclass, I think, very unique and very rewarding. And that's what I would say it means. That's the angle which I would say it means the most to me as a fan.
Sure, for sure. I mean, it's like we didn't have this. We didn't have stuff like this growing up. So for me, this is fantastic. Matt, where do you sit? Where's your perspective on this?
I think I'm just enthralled that we've been able to have all the different guests who want to pour out their knowledge of the films that were made, or in some cases not made. And I think one of the things that I'm really looking forward to is that people can come to this convention and they can learn new things, and you can hear different perspectives that maybe you haven't heard before. And it's a chance and an opportunity to both interact through the live Q&A sessions when we can have those available, but also to just sit back and like take in the knowledge that's being dumped out and learn something new. And I think for me, that's what I've always loved about G-Fest and the panels there, is that I could go and I could learn new things about movies that I loved. And for me, that's what this convention kind of embodies. And again, I mentioned earlier, but like really, this is a chance that in my mind, we're able to give back to a lot of different, to all the fans and all the dealers and vendors and stuff that have like suffered through COVID. 2020 sucked for so many of us. Like this is a break. This is a 3-day break from, am I allowed to swear? I don't remember what the
Go
rules.
for it, man. Go for it.
This is a 3-day break from the shit show that is 2020. And I mean, and I mean that wholeheartedly. All of us have gone through different things, whether it's been job stuff or whatever. Like this is a 3-day break where hopefully if you have the time, you can sit down in front of your computer, your TV, however you have it set up, and just watch through YouTube and like learn some stuff about movies you love. And maybe just like shut your brain off and take in stuff. Like that's what I think is really important about this event.
Right. We were talking before the cast started, and we were just kind of going over, the entire cluster that is 2020. And I believe that you guys and this event, that along with you, Steve, and the entire team at Masterclass is going to put on for us. I think it's going to be a real bright spot, not just for fans, but just for film enthusiasts in general. It's going to be, would you say that this event is going to be a really great jumping off point for someone who even is not a diehard Godzilla, Tokusatsu, Kaiju fan?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you're going to hear from the people that made the films or had impact on the films. And if you want to just come and learn about stuff, like the questions will be framed thoughtfully and in a way that anybody can just kind of sit back and learn stuff. So absolutely.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah. It's like someone like my wife, who I would consider a normie, who's not into this stuff whatsoever, can sit down and actually can sit down with me and watch it and actually, take some really substantive stuff away from it.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So, fellas, where can people find more about Kaiju Masterclass?
So you can go to our website, of course, kaijumasterclass.com. We do have information about all of the guests, the organizers. We're going to have our schedule posted shortly in the next couple of days. We hope to have all that stuff finalized. You can look us up on Facebook. Of course, we're under Kaiju Masterclass. We also have the Kaiju Masterclass Vendor Marketplace. Both are groups that you can actually join, or the vendor page is a group that you can join. We're on Twitter. It's at Kaiju_MC. That's for Masterclass, so at Kaiju MC. You can email us at kaijumasterclass@gmail.com. Those are kind of the main places people can get a hold of us. We're happy to answer questions. We're happy to respond and interact with people. Just really looking forward to what we can do for the community. And just honestly, I'm looking forward to the event and learning what I can from all the people that have put together these movies.
Right. And we've mentioned it a lot already. This is going to be this is going to be an entirely YouTube event, correct?
Yep, it's going to be on YouTube, and obviously once it's on YouTube, the videos will all stay up there. It'll be live streamed, so everything that you see will more or less be in real time. I'm not aware of any that we're going to have to pre-record at this point. We do have some surprises coming too. So like our roster is not finalized. We actually have some guests that we're getting ready to announce. So on top of everyone else that we've already announced, we do have some more surprises in the works. And I also forgot to mention, we are on Instagram, and that's just Kaiju_Masterclass. So if you're into Instagram, you can find us there as well.
Now I would, you got my curiosity piqued. Do you want to share any guests that aren't listed on the site yet? Just as a little teaser for the folks that are going to listen to this. I
wish that I could, but I would be stabbed. Steve would stab me to death, I think. Steve and John.
Okay, so I would kick myself if I didn't ask, so forgive me. But you said that we were talking about before the show started that there are some unnamed guests. So I wanted to kind of put you guys on the spot a little bit and see if maybe we could get a little behind the scenes of someone or some event or something that has not actually been announced yet. So
well, I can give you maybe a much less interesting tidbit. I will tell you that this convention has really come together like in the last 2.5-3 weeks. Like it's been like all the work that you do for this like pays off. Like everything almost seems to come together at the 0 hour. So like the amount of stress that convention planners are under, I can't even imagine when people are actually attending in person and money's on the line. And for us, like, it's just been a whirlwind the past couple weeks. So, like, that's why we haven't finalized schedule, and that's why maybe people were asking a lot of questions. We're like, I promise we will have all the information out as soon as like, there's going to be a time we hit the final button, and all the information will be out there as far as schedule and all the different guests that we haven't technically announced yet. We hope to have that done, I think, by Thursday or Friday. I think that's the goal, and that would be... what are we recording? Tonight's Tuesday? So I think Friday the 25th or Saturday the 26th, we hope to have all that information finalized.
Well, it sounds fantastic, and I know it's going to be October the 2nd through the 4th. What time does it start?
I'm going to defer to Patrick because we've had some. That's part of the scheduling thing. Where like we have, depending on some of the guests, we might have to tweak our schedule some. I think the initial time is going to be what is it 6 o'clock, Patrick?
On Friday, I believe our first event's gonna be happening at 5 p.m. Pacific time, which is like 3 p.m. Central and like 2 p.m. Eastern. I do believe. Don't quote me on that. There'll be a schedule coming out pretty soon. But yeah, it's gonna start. No matter where you are in the United States, it's gonna start sometime in the afternoon on Friday the 2nd.
Okay.
And then Saturday and Sunday will just be jam packed with all kinds of hopefully wonderful things.
Right. So I can turn on at any time during those days and just sit down and enjoy.
And if you miss something, like Matt said, it's all the YouTube videos will stay up there, so you can always just go back and catch one that if you couldn't make it, it's there for you to access anytime you want it.
Okay. Fantastic. I'm really looking forward to it. So I want to give you guys a few minutes here to do some shameless plugs for yourself. So starting with Patrick, where can folks find you online?
Well, you can find me by I am still active on Toho Kingdom. So there is I think there's even like an archive link where all my articles are posted. I'm not sure about that. And of course, if you just Google sci-fi.com, then Patrick Galvan after that, my sci-fi articles will turn up. Aside from that, I am kind of mysterious and hard to find, but I'm out there, and my articles are all free to read online. So it's I'm horrible at plugging myself, but
Well, let me ask you, Patrick, are there any articles that I can put in the show notes that you're particularly proud of that I can show folks?
Sure. I guess one that I'm very fond of is there's an article I did on the director TAKAO OKAWARA, who was most famous for directing a majority of the Heisei films. I did an article called TAKAO OKAWARA, A Career Retrospective. That was done for Toho Kingdom. I also did an article for Sci-Fi on Godzilla Raids Again, which was called... I'm already blanking on what the title was. I think it was called Godzilla Raids Again was more than a cash grab or something to that effect. You could find it on Sci-Fi, but those two articles I'm very, very fond of.
Okay, great. Fantastic, man. And like I said, I will make sure to put those in the show notes so that for people that aren't quite familiar with your work, they can have a really fantastic point of reference.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
So, Matt, where can folks find you guys online?
So, of course, you can find us, Kaiju Transmissions. We're on all of your iTunes, we're on Podbean, anywhere you get your typical podcast, you probably would be able to find us. You can also tweet at us. It's at KT_podcast. That's KT like kite. And then I actually have my personal Twitter, which is just at Matt's Monsters, MATTS Monsters. And then, just Kaiju Transmissions at gmail.com if you have a question. We actually do feel like if people ever want to reach out to us and recommend stuff or ask us a question, we try to respond to those as best we can. But yeah, that's all. That's where you can find us.
Words are hard, man.
Dude, it is 10:30 and I have worked like 10 hours today. So yes, words are hard.
The words are getting stuck in your throat.
Sure. That is,
sure.
I see what you did there.
I got it. Oh, man. Oh, I love War of the Gargantuas, but man, that scene. Okay. But guys, thank you so much for this. This has been a really pleasant conversation. I've enjoyed just talking with you guys and learning more about this really ambitious endeavor that you guys have all embarked on, and I'm looking forward to participating in the event and enjoying all of the content. So on behalf of myself and everyone who will listen to this, thank you so much for having this conversation.
Oh,
thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Thank you for showing interest in Kaiju Masterclass. And I think I can speak for both of us that it was fun to be here. And if you ever want to have either of us on again, it'd be a pleasure.
Absolutely, you guys are both going to be added to my short list.
Thanks.
Absolutely. So, to you, dear audio listener, thank you so much for sticking around with us for this fantastic conversation. And I want to encourage each and every one of you out there to go check out Kaiju Masterclass and participate in all the things that they have going on there. So until next time, I'm Michael, the Kaiju Groupie, signing off. Thank you for listening to the Kaiju Groupie Podcast, a podcast produced and hosted by Michael Hamilton using redcircle.com. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to continue this conversation, please email me directly at kaijugroupiepod@gmail.com. Also, follow us on social media by joining the Kaiju Groupie Facebook group, on Twitter at Kaiju Groupie Pod, and on Instagram at The Kaiju Groupie. The show is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you find your favorite giant monster podcasts. Also, please take a moment to rate and review the show. This will help spread the word to other Kaiju and Tokusatsu fans, and if you do, I promise I'll read your comments on the next episode. All film, audio clips, and graphics belong to their respective copyright holders with no infringement being intended or implied. So until next time, I'm Michael, the Kaiju Groupie, signing off.